Okay, so we're going to jump in the time machine and head back to 1991 to look at this really fascinating idea from the journal Medical Hypotheses. It's a concept that connects two worlds you would probably never, ever think to put together.
So let me just ask you this. What could a marathon runner, someone pushing their body to the absolute limit, possibly have in common with a woman who's in labor? The answer is actually pretty surprising, and it's the key to this entire idea.
Get this, they are both endurance athletes. The whole premise of this paper is built on that powerful idea. Metabolically speaking, a woman in labor is performing one of the most demanding physical events of her life. And once you start to see it that way, everything changes.
So, to really get this, we have to first see birth as a true endurance event. I'm not just talking metaphorically here, I mean physiologically.
This quote from the paper it gets right to the heart of it. This isn't just some nice comparison, it's a clinical observation. The authors are pointing to a very specific, shared metabolic problem, a condition they call ketoacidosis.
Okay, so let's zero in on that problem. What in the world is ketoacidosis, and why did these authors think it was such a big deal during childbirth?
To put it simply, it's an energy crisis. Your body, and especially your muscles, really wants to run on its favorite, most efficient fuel, which is glucose. But when that runs out, your body has to switch to its backup generators, burning fat and protein. The trouble is, this backup system creates these acidic byproducts called ketones, and when those build up, it can cause all sorts of issues.
So, you might be wondering, why does this energy crisis happen in the first place? Well, the paper uses a very strong word here. It says the fetus essentially parasitizes a huge amount of glucose from the mother's system. This makes it incredibly hard for the mother to build up her own fuel stores to begin with.
And this kicks off what the paper calls a noxious cycle. It's like a dangerous chain reaction. The energy crisis leads to the mother getting fatigued. That fatigue can then affect the uterus, meaning contractions get less effective. And when contractions are less effective, it can reduce oxygen flow to the baby, which then causes fetal distress, which just puts more strain on the whole system, making the cycle even worse. It's a real downward spiral.
So, if labor is an endurance event, and the problem is a full-blown energy crisis, what can we learn from the original endurance athletes? How do they deal with this exact same problem?
Well, they prepare. You've heard of this, right? Athletes intentionally carb load before a huge race. They eat a diet packed with carbohydrates to stuff their muscles and liver full of glycogen. It's literally like filling up a high-performance fuel tank before a really long road trip, making sure they have plenty of that premium fuel to use when they need it most.
And that, right there, brings us to the core hypothesis of the paper. The authors basically said, hey, why don't we take this strategy that we know works for athletes and apply it directly to preparing for childbirth?
Now, for some context, back when this paper was written in 1991, the authors noted that in most industrialized countries, carbohydrates made up about 45% of the average person's diet. So that's kind of our starting point.
The specific proposal was to bump that number up to 65%, starting around the 37th week of pregnancy. The idea was that this moderate increase over the final few weeks would give the mother's body a chance to build up those all-important glycogen stores, essentially to carb load for the main event.
And here's where it gets really interesting. While a 65% carb diet might sound pretty extreme to us today, the authors point out that this was actually a totally common way of eating in the United States less than 100 years before. So the proposal wasn't some radical new idea. It was more like a return to a more traditional diet.
So here's the crucial comparison. How does this kind of preparation stack up against what was often done at the time, which was just giving an IV glucose drip during labor? The paper argues that when you carb load with food, you build stable energy stores that your liver naturally controls. An IV drip, on the other hand, completely bypasses the body's own regulatory system, and that can lead to these big, wild swings in blood sugar for both the mom and the baby.
All right, let's bring it all together. What's the big takeaway from this hypothesis from way back in 1991? And why is looking at childbirth through this athletic lens so important?
The logic is actually pretty straightforward when you lay it all out. First, you reframe childbirth as the massive endurance event it is. Second, you identify the real metabolic problem, this energy crisis that leads to ketoacidosis. Third, you look to the experts in endurance, athletes, for a solution. Build up your fuel reserves beforehand. The proposed solution was a simple, dietary one that, in theory, could provide a much more stable and controlled source of energy than the typical medical intervention of the day.
And it all leaves us with this one final, really thought-provoking question.
If we start thinking of a laboring mother not just as a patient, but as a high-performance athlete, could we unlock simple, powerful strategies for a better, safer experience for everyone? This paper from over 3 decades ago suggests the answer might just be a resounding yes.